It's not. Hello? Yeah, it was working. Hello, 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 hello. Yeah, it's on. It was working a second ago. Did it just did it just give out? Hello? 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 No. Well, we need this one. Check, check, check. Oh, I'm back. And I'm back. All right. Okay, well, totally okay if you're still grabbing food, but I'll invite everyone to take a seat now. So it's around 6:10 p.m. on June 26th, and we're going to call this forum to order now. So this is a public meeting of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. Thank you all so much for being here. My name's Dory Grabinski. I'm the PCCEP project manager. And for most of the night, we're going to be led by two facilitators, Afrida and Teresa. Yeah, and I think I'm going to pass it over to Teresa at this time.
Yes, thank you, everyone. So lovely to see so many of you this afternoon. We're going to go over some of the slides with information, and you absolutely don't need to turn around to look at me. Please enjoy your food. This is a great time. Feel free to look at the screen up and read along with me. But as Dory mentioned, today's meeting is a public meeting, and it's an in-person meeting only. We are not going to be engaging with folks who are watching the live stream. So people are only going to be watching it, just for your information. We'll go into the next slide. For those of you who aren't familiar about PCCEP, PCCEP is a group of 13 community members who are independent from the city and the Portland Police Bureau, also known as PPB. We were created as one of the remedies under the DOJ settlement agreement to ensure community voice is a part of policing and public safety in Portland. We make recommendations to the mayor and chief of police under the settlement agreement. They are required to formally respond within 60 days. Next slide, please. And as in any meeting, we have community standards. Among these standards, I'll read off what we as a group lean on. Be respectful of other attendees, panelists, and event staff in your word choice, and avoid harmful comments. This includes comments that are considered likely to disrupt, provoke, or attack others. Racist, sexist, homophobic, sexuality explicit, abusive, or otherwise harmful. Hate speech, harassment, or doxing in any form. Respect event staff and their responsibility to uphold these guidelines. Attendees who violate these standards may be asked to leave. And we also have community agreements. We're going to listen actively and respectfully, share airtime, be present and open to new information and perspectives, assume positive intent, respect each other, respect the group, speak your own truth, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, ask questions to clarify, and call out bias. Afrida?
Yeah, all right. So we're going to do a little note on content, but right before we do that, we're going to do a little housekeeping. You all know where the drinks and the food is at. Again, enjoy, engage at your will. Also, just noting the bathrooms are through these double doors and then down the hallway and to the right. Right? Okay, so that's where the bathroom is. And so also if you need additional assistance up and downstairs, if you just bodied the stairs or just took the stairs, just know there's also an elevator for additional assistance as well. So a note on content. Today's event contains discussions of personal experiences that may be difficult to engage with. These instances are shared to inform and to deepen understanding about the issues at hand. This forum's purpose is to provide a space for conversation around the experience of living with brain injuries and the ways that this intersects with policing. This means that there are folks in the space who live with brain injuries. Please be mindful and take care of yourselves in these shared spaces. This forum was planned by PCCEP members who live with brain injuries and in collaboration with Brain Injuries Connections Northwest. And for tonight's agenda, we already started with some of the just introductions and stuff. We'll have opening comments by Tia, and then we'll introduce our speakers, and we have a panelist of 4 individuals who will speak today. After the speakers, we have a roundtable discussion, so it's an opportunity for you all at your table to engage in some discussion questions we provided. After the roundtable discussion, we'll go into a dialogue and share out with our speakers. So that's an opportunity for us not to only hear about your experiences, or for the whole room to hear about your experiences at the table, but also to engage in some of that dialogue with our speakers as well. Then we'll have some closing comments, and then we will be adjourned. All right, next slide. All right, now I turn it over to Tia for our opening comments. That's all right.
Whoops, okay. I literally just got done writing this, so hopefully I can track it and read all the things I crossed out. Welcome to our forum on brain injury and policing, and thank you for being here with us tonight. My name is Tia Palafox. I have been a PCCEP member since 2021 and the co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee the last couple of years, and I helped plan this event tonight. I had a massive stroke in 2009, which caused me to have an acquired brain injury and disability. I have lived experience knowing what it is like being misunderstood. Most people who meet me think I injured my leg and arm in some sort of accident. When I get flustered in, Oh, this is the one. Sorry. But it's where I talk to people. Oh, right here.
Did you read this one already?
No, okay. I think I got it. When I get flustered, I have learned to talk to people about my brain injury and to ask people to repeat and ask questions about what they mean. And as you see, I get flustered pretty easily. And so I have that understanding of what it's like to feel misunderstood with my slow processing and communication skills. I sincerely believe that it is important to bring in awareness to brain injuries and how we can all have a better understanding of how to best interact with us in a stressful situation. It is especially important to think about how this experience intersects with policing. Being misunderstood could lead to worse outcomes with police. This event was planned in collaboration with Brain Injury Connections Northwest. Fern Wilgus is the president and founder. Can you give a wave, Fern? This is Fern. And thank you so much for your help. Stephanie Grace, who's also a panelist tonight, is a board member to the Brain Injury Connections Northwest, and we really appreciate both Fern and Stephanie's help in planning tonight's event and bringing an awareness to this topic. Okay. We plan this event to cultivate understanding, dialogue, and action regarding our brain-injured community and their interactions with police and the law. What we have learned is there is not a lot of information available locally in this area. The goals for the event tonight is to create more awareness and understanding around this issue, both for law enforcement and community members. And how PCCEP fits in is that we use the information we learned from community discussions tonight so that we can think about solutions moving forward. So what we talk about today could inform our future work to improve policing for people with brain injuries and other types of disabilities is our hope. That's my opening statement. Thank you so much. Thank you.
The first speaker. So tonight we have David Cracky. He is the Oregon Brain Injury Advocate Coordinator at the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training. And we also have with us Andy Ellis, PhD, rehab psychologist. We also have Stephanie Grace, brain injury survivor, member, Supreme Court Counsel for Inclusion and Fairness for Multnomah County Justice Fellow, and she's a Multnomah Justice Fellow, excuse me. And then lastly, we also have Jonathan Boland, who is a brain injury survivor and is a strength training coach who's gonna share his story with us, which I'm really excited about. So we'll go ahead and begin with David Cracky. You're up.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Really honored to be here. I want to shout out to Fern, who I have known for 15, maybe 18 years now. Yeah, she's telling me to slow that down. Without Fern, a lot would not have happened in this community for brain injury survivors. As mentioned, my name is David Cracky. I am Oregon's Brain Injury Advocate Coordinator, a position that was created by the governor's office back in 2018. I was asked to become Oregon's first brain injury advocate coordinator. Very, very honored and happy to do so. I am an Oregon attorney. I've been an attorney since 1990, was a litigator prior to my involvement here. And my presentation will be on brain injury and first responders, building understanding and connection. I'm going to briefly just state my bio. I've been heavily involved in brain injury policy since 2002, but the real culmination or real kind of highlights are being one of the co-authors and leaders of the effort to bring the nation's first enacted return to play protocols to Oregon and to the country. Expanded that effort to all young athletes in the state of Oregon in 2013, provided temporary accommodations, immediate temporary accommodations for students with brain injury returning to school, pursuant to legislation in 2020, authored a bill on zoonotic disease prevention. Zoonotic disease is COVID, which unfortunately resulted in many brain injury type of injuries for the sufferers. And then finally, and I think most importantly, I was the co-author of Senate Bill 420, which passed in 2023, thanks to the huge group effort, including Brain Injury Connections Northwest, which will finally provide brain injury resource navigation in Oregon, a much needed bill. So I'm going to very briefly talk about kind of what is a brain injury. First of all, I am saying brain injury, not traumatic brain injury. It's a really important distinction. Far too long we have talked specifically about traumatic brain injury, and that's really an insult to folks who have brain injury but not in the quote-unquote traumatic causation category. Brain injury can be caused by trauma, by stroke, infection, tumor, hypoxia, which is lack of oxygen, or exposure to toxins. The CDC calls a traumatic brain injury, TBI, caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head or penetrating head injury that disrupts the normal function of the brain. Effects may be temporary or permanent. In fact, if you've had one concussion only, there's an 86% chance that you will recover fully from that concussion. When you start getting multiple concussions, that kind of full recovery rate goes down significantly. But what that also means is there's approximately 14% of the people who suffer a concussion, just their first concussion, and end up with some form of long-term chronic problems, typically known as post-concussive symptom or syndrome. A concussion is a brain injury, and as I said, multiple traumatic brain injuries have a cumulative effect. Leading causes of brain injury. We often equate brain injury with sports, and while yes, they happen there, you'll see that that's a very small percentage of total brain injuries. Most brain injuries are caused by falls, 52%. This is the time that I pitch all of us to be very careful as we age. Make sure that you have a good awareness of where you are. Use those railings and other protective devices. Those who know me know that I'm a prevention guy. I would way rather have a brain injury prevented than unfortunately deal with the effect of a brain injury later. That's really the reason why we did all of our return to play laws, why we did our return to school laws as well. You see a significant portion from assaults, especially in a domestic violence situation. Military sexual trauma, domestic violence, intimate partner violence can typically lead to assaultive behavior or also some sort of hypoxic or anoxic brain injury. Motor vehicle collisions need to be obviously recognized. It's very important that we do what we can to drive safely. And then there's that huge swath, 18% of other. Meaning that there are just myriad ways that you can create or obtain a brain injury. Dr. Ellis is going to speak more on this, but just briefly, I'm going to demonstrate or talk that there are typically 4 areas where a brain injury will affect a person's life. In the cognitive, and you'll see the difficulties there in the bullet points. Physical, you'll see with slowed movements, coordination impacts, headache, balance, fatigue, vision issues, pain. Behavioral, that's where you get the aggression, impulsivity, anger management, social skill challenges. These can be really challenging behaviors. I was just today meeting with the director of the Department of Corrections, explaining to him that approximately 70% of male inmates and closer to 90% of female inmates have a history of brain injury. That's compared to about 8% in the general population. And oftentimes it's that emotional dysregulation or that behavioral aggression and impulsivity that can lead to that criminal behavior, which can really have tragic outcome. And finally, emotional, where you find depression, anxiety, irritability, mood swings, blunted emotion. When you combine these also, you typically or often will find brain injury as a comorbidity along with post-traumatic stress disorder when we're talking about veterans, folks with depression, a substance use disorder. You can really get into some serious and complex behaviors when you start combining brain injury with those other afflictions. So common cognitive impairments, decreased attention and concentration, memory difficulties, and so on. You guys can read those. I have a number of slides I want to get to, but the bottom line is that a brain injury really can affect a global sense of who that person is and what they are able to do. Other conditions, as I mentioned, generalized anxiety, major depression, post-traumatic stress, poor affect, unfortunately suicidal ideation, and then substance use and or alcohol addiction. Brain injury and homelessness, unfortunately, has a significant bidirectional relationship. Homelessness leads to problems on the street, assault being one, leads to brain injury. Once you get a brain injury, it leads to homelessness. It's something that we're working with Central City Concern, with Blanchet House and others, giving them trainings, letting them, making sure they understand that, suggesting and encouraging them to screen their clients, and then to connect them through the resource navigation program with appropriate support and services to hopefully break this cycle. If you're a veteran, homeless veteran, there is a 93% that you have a history of brain injury. This is devastating. I will be speaking at the Department of Defense VA conference, the national conference, which is being held in Portland this year, and on veterans, brain injury, and suicidal ideation. And I have some choice words to tell the DOD. They spend a lot of time training civilians how to be soldiers. They spend 0 time training soldiers how to be civilians again. And that's a huge, huge gap. And you know, it's the old adage, a stranger sees in 15 minutes what a homeowner doesn't see for 10 years. And I'm going to be talking to a lot of folks who have been living there for 10 years or more. So I'm excited about that. Brain injuries are more prevalent within at-risk populations, unhoused, veterans, folks with mental and behavioral health, victims of intimate partner violence, and those involved in the justice system. You'll notice that there are sites here. I'm going to make these slides available, and I have the citations. I work at the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training at the University of Oregon. Just a great group of researchers who I've known forever, well before I took this position, and everything that I'm talking about here is peer-reviewed and evidence-based. So homelessness, again, this is that staggering statistic in the general homelessness population. 71% have a history of brain injury, with 74% of those experiencing the brain injury before or prior to becoming homeless. You can imagine how that happens. They're precariously housed. They're working a kind of an hourly job with 0 benefits, 0 protection. They get in a car collision, end up with a brain injury. They can't make it to their job. They get fired. The rent is due. They don't have the rent. They're out, and there you go. So it's really something that we as a society need to take a lot more seriously than we are. And it's really an honor to be here, and that's kind of part of what we're doing here. And I certainly hope that the folks in the room who are from Portland Police and others understand and listen to this and recognize this bidirectionality and endeavor to learn about it and to do something about it. Brain injury and first responders. I wanted to highlight federal legislation that was passed in 2022. I'm not sure this is really well known, but it creates a TBI and PTSD training requirement for first responders, including information on the conditions and symptoms of a traumatic brain injury, an acquired brain injury, and post-traumatic stress. We'll train them on techniques to interact with persons who have a traumatic brain injury, an acquired brain injury, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Critically important, as Tia mentioned, and as in her remarks, there's a lot of confusion with a person with a brain injury who presents in a way where the officer's first impression might be that person is impaired. That person who knows what they're doing, and they don't think necessarily that that person has a brain injury. And it can lead to real problems, and Fern and others can talk about that in greater detail. The training also will talk about how to recognize people with a brain injury, and also, so I would just want to pause kind of briefly here. This is a big deal. This is a new law. And if it becomes implemented and if this training is received, it's going to go a long way towards making the first responders understand what's going on. I have a personal beef with the way that brain injuries are documented with EMTs. The EMT will arrive on a scene. A person maybe has just regained consciousness and therefore is conscious when the paramedics arrive. That box or the document they currently use has a binary choice on loss of consciousness, yes or no. And it gets checked no because the person is awake or has regained consciousness when that first responder has arrived, when in fact that person was unconscious, which is a huge indicator, a de facto indicator of a brain injury. And it just seems to me that this is one thing the Department of Defense does correctly. They ask their question instead of, did you lose consciousness, which is akin to me asking you, tell me what you don't remember, which is an impossible question. They instead ask, what's the last thing you remember before the injury? What's the next thing you remember after the injury? I had a client who was rear-ended on the Selwood Bridge. She remembers the headlights, and then she remembers waking up in the emergency room, but it turns out she was up and talking and walking around and interacting the whole time. But and so she was listed as no loss of consciousness, but she was certainly in an altered or an impaired consciousness. And if they asked that two-part question, they would have realized that. The law also will require some studies about the prevalence of brain injury among first responders, which is also something that we can't ignore. They do find themselves in risky situations and are subject to conditions that can lead to brain injuries themselves, and that can be really tragic when it is not recognized and not supported by their peers. And again, the final bullet point, greater awareness and education about brain injury is beneficial to everyone. Common accommodations. I'm going to wrap this up. I have about 90 seconds left. But basically, the big bullet points: simplify things, allow extra time, reduce distractions, check in with people. The resource navigators are going to be checking in with the folks who contact their office on a periodic basis, because you can't just talk to a brain injury survivor, tell them one time, and expect that necessarily to be recognized and understood and followed. You have to make sure that the information that you provide sticks. Repeat yourself if necessary and provide visual cues. The bullet points describe other more detailed accommodations on this page that you might consider as well. When I was practicing law or litigating cases, I would always make sure that when a brain injury client came in, we sat in my conference room, the curtains were drawn, these ridiculously horrible lights for people with brain injuries were turned off, and I would limit our interactions to about 45 minutes, whether they wanted to or not, because I just knew what we were dealing with, and you really have to use a person-centered approach. More accommodations include reviewing materials, prioritizing, setting routines, setting plans, offering support, asking for help. This is my colleague at the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training, Doug Gomez. He's a PhD, psychology PhD, and then myself. Again, here are the references for anyone who cares. And then at CBERT, which is cbert.org, we have, they're all there, trust me. At cbert.org, we have wonderful resources, and I would encourage you to all log on. They're free and available for anyone. So that's it, you guys. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the questions. And at this, I'll turn it back over. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, David Cracky. We really appreciate your overview of what brain injury is and for elevating the issue locally, statewide, and nationally. Next, we have Dr. Ellis. Dr. Ellis?
Many of you look familiar to me, so hello to the folks that I know for one reason or another. It's an honor to be here tonight. Thanks to all of you for allowing me to say a few words. I'm going to recover some of the ground that Dave did. And if you don't know Dave, Oregon is very lucky to have a skilled and passionate advocate like Dave Cracky out there working on the front lines for us. Let's see if I can. Yeah, okay, I think I see it.
You can just arrow too.
Oh, yeah. This arrow right here? Okay, thank you. I'm a little slow. I'm not going to try and match the pace that Dave did, nor will I provide any references because I'm pretty much making this up. If any of you have worked with me before, you won't be surprised. I focused on traumatic brain injury because I know that most folks who have been incarcerated, and probably most of the folks who are houseless, have suffered a traumatic versus an acquired brain injury. But as Tia noted, a lot of the effects are very similar, and it's a distinction that I don't think is terribly useful. It makes people kind of categorize or pigeonhole folks when really the ground is very similar, that whether you've had an acquired or traumatic injury, the ground is pretty difficult for both groups, I think. Traumatic physical trauma to the brain acquired can be, as Dave said, stroke, repercussions from a brain surgery, and not just simply not getting enough air during a surgery can cause a brain injury. So anoxia, hypoxia. I dug into some of the recent research, and there's nothing that's super cutting edge, but my numbers are a little bit less grim than Dave's that I found. Meta-analysis, which is super fancy, throw that into a sentence and you sound smart. I would recommend it. It's just a group, it's a conglomeration of a bunch of studies that look at the same sorts of things. So researchers have pulled together enough data to get a pretty good idea that there are 8.5% of people in the U.S. that they're walking around in the general population with at least one brain injury. And that about half of the folks involved in the criminal legal system, and those are folks who've been arrested, who are actively incarcerated, who are in the process of the system for one reason or another, or one part of the system or another, about half of those folks have sustained at least one traumatic brain injury. And when you look at the houseless, and this is important to consider when we're talking about policing, because if you're houseless on the streets of Portland, you're probably going to interact with law enforcement way more often than most of the folks that are getting up and going to an office or sitting at home in the suburbs are going to. And half of those folks, over half of them, who are either houseless or marginally housed, are estimated to have had at least one traumatic brain injury. A lot of the literature that I looked at was related to incarceration more than people who are on the street. And I just thought it was interesting that by gender, 60% of the incarcerated folks that are men have a brain injury, but for women it's almost 40%. So it's a really, really high number for everybody who's incarcerated. And there's so much about being houseless or being incarcerated that is the worst possible fit for somebody with a brain injury. You could not dream up a worse scenario. So there are a lot of ways that a brain injury affects us, and these are things that I see in my practice in my office every day. I have had the honor to work with almost exclusively brain injury survivors for 25 years. Starting at OHSU as a resident and then through my career in various programs in Portland. And I say honor because when someone with a brain injury comes to you, they're in a, almost by nature, a vulnerable position, and they're letting me and my team into their life in a very, by nature, unguarded and naked way. And I always remind my team to respect just the courage it takes to walk into a treatment setting when so many of those people spend my first interaction with them talking to me about the lack of quality treatment they've had every other step in the way in the medical system. Not to mention the criminal legal system. Good grief. So, traumatic brain injury affects our thoughts or cognitions, the way that we remember, mostly short term. Some severe traumatic brain injuries can erase wide swaths of our long-term memory. The way that we solve problems, the way that the pace at which we can consider information, take in information, generate responses, share information is slower. There are a lot of changes that happen. It can affect our emotions, no big surprise there. It can affect our physical capabilities. And I'll go through each one of these in some detail. Sensory functioning, I think, is a aspect of brain injury that all of you probably know very well, but I think in terms of the medical, insurance, legal systems, they're just coming around to the idea that, oh, wait, we're going to have to take care of someone's vision, their hearing. How did that get affected? What are you talking about? Insurance companies hate that stuff. And if there's anyone from the insurance industry here, I'm sorry, but they hate that stuff because they don't think they should be paying for that. But it's part of the injury. It's proven. And behavior, of course, is probably the most notorious aspect of brain injury, and that can be changes of all sorts. So when you think about cognition, and if this kind of stereotyping is offensive, I totally get it. I was just trying to sort of capture the big things that I see repetitively. But confusion is a big one. Born largely of just having trouble taking in information and making the right assumptions, categorizing, reading the social cues so that the information comes with. All of that is so much more complex and so much more instantaneous in a healthy brain than we realize until the healthy brain is compromised. Poor memory, usually short-term memory is much more fragile than long-term memory. Long-term memory is generally stored in several places, in different places in the short-term memory, so it's just more resilient to physical trauma or acquired trauma. But short-term memory deficits can be just remarkable. I mean, I've had people tell me the same story 4 times in an hour with the fervency and the sincerity that just tells me they do not know that they're repeating themselves. And that's a pretty remarkable thing to live with. And the people all around you know it, and you just don't have that same level of awareness, and it's incredibly frustrating for folks and deflating. Limited problem-solving skills. If you kind of put yourself in the place of somebody who's interacting with law enforcement, having limited problem-solving skills can look like opposition. It can look like you're trying to be a pain in the ass on purpose. It can look a lot of bad ways to someone in law enforcement who's trying to get answers to questions very quickly. It's a terrible situation. Disorganization, that was a vague term, and I apologize for that. That can be in terms of your physical space. I found an article about how people who are incarcerated and they are living with a traumatic brain injury, they come afoul of the prison guards because they can't keep their cells organized. It's a mess. It feels like they're doing it on purpose, and the guards get irritated. They want things sometimes organized. Disorganization of thought and speech is also prominent. Slowed response time just takes time to take information in and get information out. Inability to anticipate negative outcomes from behavior. That's, if you've ever raised a teenager, sound familiar, right? Frontal lobe's not done developing till they're about 26. So teenagers, one of their hallmarks is why does it cost $500 a month to insure a 16-year-old to get behind the wheel of a car? It's expensive. They don't anticipate how their stupid actions in speeding are going to lead to possible calamity, right? And that is common among brain injury survivors, particularly those who've been hit in the frontal lobe. That's the part of our brain that allows us to think, okay, well, if I get on that ladder, and I did this myself, I'm wearing headphones, I'm listening to music. I know my vestibular system's compromised when I'm listening to music. I'm still putting up Christmas lights with my headphones on. And I was on my ass before I knew I was on my ass. It can happen to anybody. TBI and emotions, very, very, very common. This is all preaching to the choir a little bit. Mood swings, often called emotional lability or emotional dysregulation, common after a brain injury. Poor impulse control. Anger outbursts, particularly problematic, right, when you're talking to law enforcement. Depression, as Dave said, suicidal ideation, suicide risk is much higher in survivors of traumatic brain injury, especially those whose injury was sustained in a trauma, in a emotionally traumatic fashion. And just the depression of, if you hurt your arm, and your arm hurts, or you have tingling in your fingertips or whatever, you're like, something's wrong with my arm. What's wrong with my arm? But if you have a brain injury and all these things are changing at once, it's not what's wrong with my brain, it's what's wrong with me. Because the brain is me is my brain. There's no distinction there. And that is a threat that if you haven't had it, you do not understand. Anxiety, obviously, it's terrifying to not be able to, you live with a sort of set of expectations out of you and your body and your brain for decades, and then one day it's different. And that is a lot to adjust to. And the people that are in my office every day, that's the main thing. And I don't care if I had a guy who's really wealthy, and he sustained his injury. This is in my office 2 days ago. He crashed a private plane. He's right back with every other single person I've worked with, just in terms of the struggle, because when you lose yourself, money doesn't save you from that, big house doesn't save you from that, your family can't save you. You feel lost, and you don't feel worthwhile or of value in the way that you did before, and that is a long road back, and that can cause a lot of anxiety. Physical capabilities, I think this is also a little bit on the cutting edge. Balance and dizziness, treatments are getting much, much better post-injury, but still, these can be lifelong deficits. And obviously, if you have poor balance and dizziness, it's going to make you prone to falling and having another brain injury. And as Dave noted also, multiple injuries, it's an exponentially worse situation. Poor coordination, clumsiness. This can be, an extreme case would be hemiparesis, where you just lose the ability to use one half of your body. An arm and a leg, usually the arm is the slowest to come back. So a lot of people that I've worked with are trying to figure out how to do everything with one hand. How do you diaper twins with one hand? That's a very, very daunting task. Altered gait, the way they move, the way you walk. If you have altered gait and poor coordination, and your balance is off and you're dizzy, and a police officer thinks you're up to something, you're in trouble. They're going to think you're drunk or high. And I've had clients that carried a laminated note from me, like the cops are going to care, but carried a laminated note from me explaining this individual's had a brain injury, they're not drunk or high, but they might appear that way because of the way that they move. It worked a couple times. Traumatic brain injury, sensory function. So this is the one that I said was, I think, really a developing field. Following brain injury, people, I think there's some awareness that, yeah, after a concussion, you're sensitive to light, but go home and sit in a dark room for a couple days and you'll be fine. That is oversimplification and not always the case. There are a lot of people who remain sensitive to bright light for weeks and months and years. And that can be with a mild one-time concussion all the way through a severe traumatic brain injury. Reduced tolerance for loud noise, very common. A lot of people with brain injury develop habits around going to stores at times when they know they're going to be real quiet and not nearly as packed. Because crowded spaces, loud noise, bright lights, it can create a sense of when there is, and this is again something that you don't understand if you haven't lived it, but if your lived experience is that cacophony of stimulation just totally blows your circuit board, overwhelms you to the point where you can't move, and your fight or flight sense is off the charts, and you just want to get the hell out of whatever situation it is, no matter the social discomfort or the scene you're going to cause, that stays with you. That really stays with you. And you do not want to get in that situation. And the next time you are close to that situation, you're going to feel a lot of anxiety, and it's going to be more likely to happen. So a lot of folks really, really kind of rein in their socializing and their time outside the house. I'm sorry, I'm over pontificating here. My time is blown. I'm just going to turn it off. Traumatic brain injury and behavior, social avoidance, very common. Aggression, again, frontal lobes involved, way too common. And risk-taking, poor impulse control, very, very commonly seen. And then, there are some ticky things that people sometimes get into, talking to yourself and repetitive movements. So when you think about interactions with the police, inherently stressful for most people, especially if you're houseless, homeless, or on the street, or incarcerated already. And stress will exacerbate every single thing that I talked about just now. So these are kind of the things that get people afoul of the law enforcement folks when they are approached. Slow to respond, avoidant, overly aggressive, anxious, irritated, edgy, may seem intoxicated because of their physical presence and movements. Those are all things that are going to get extra scrutiny in a situation where you really need a little more space. So I've had police officers that I've worked with over the years who were actually injured in the line of duty, and these are the things that I always find a way to slip into our conversations. Like, what would really be great on the street? Speaking calmly. So much I think of what law enforcement feels like their agenda is to get answers fast, get people in line, get them to behave in a certain way. And all of that is sort of misguided with brain injury survivors, and it needs to be more slow, calm, clear. Don't shift around a lot. Don't throw different things at people very rapidly. Avoid complicated statements. Be concrete. And repeat things. Ask open-ended questions. Okay, what did I just ask you to do? And if you can do it, go somewhere quiet. Don't do it on bright lights. Don't do it in the middle of a bunch of people yelling and a bunch of traffic. And I know that's a tall order, but if we have to aim for excellence, right? If we want to get to good. Try to avoid raised voices. Emotional intensity is terrible because the brain injury survivor doesn't necessarily have the emotional weight to counterbalance the intensity coming at them from law enforcement, and they're going to go right to the same spot, and then it just gets bad in a hurry. Threats, demands, people don't need to feel cornered and threatened and confused. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Your presentation on how brain injury impacts cognition, emotions, physical capabilities, and sensory functions, especially when under stress. And now we have one of two people who are brain injury survivors who are going to be speaking. We're going to have Stephanie Grace share a little bit about her experience. Stephanie?
have a slide. I apologize. Oh, hit the button. Is it on? Oh, we good? Okay. Dang, girl. You make me feel like I shouldn't even be up here talking. You know what I mean? All three of y'all feel like I just feel
You're amazing. Stop it.
Unqualified and just. But I first want to thank everybody for having me here and just showing up. You guys could be at home right now, sleep, or at home having a beer or something. You know what I mean? Chilling, eating, or something with your family. But I want to thank all the speakers today, because you guys informed me of a lot of stuff that I really don't even talk about, and then things that I go through, and I'm like, doggone it, I feel like that, I do that, I people tell me I look like that, or I do these things and whatnot, so I really appreciate you guys informing me more about what I'm feeling on the inside that I can't verbally say, you know what I mean? You guys did all that schooling, and I wouldn't even dare do no schooling like they did. But I appreciate it. And you guys are doing amazing work, all three of y'all. Everybody in here is doing amazing work. But I appreciate you guys. And crazy that he was almost my lawyer, my attorney during my case before I went to prison. So it's, crazy world. 7 years later now. Crazy. Wow. Appreciate you, though. Where do I start? From Portland. Born and raised, two brothers, one little sister. Growing up it wasn't that easy, but it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? It was go to church on Sundays, Wednesdays, Fridays. You know what I mean? Few days a week we was heading to the church and to the altar. I'm 4 years old, going up to the altar and looking up, getting prayed over and whatnot. I'm just, how y'all doing? But growing up wasn't bad. We had everything that we needed. We didn't have everything we wanted, but we had everything we needed. And clothes on your back, food on the table, somewhere to sleep, and love. That was the biggest one, was love and support. But went to Irvington Elementary School. I went to Park Rose Middle School. Played football, basketball. That's all I loved to do, was just play sports. Went to Park Rose High School. I started quarterback my freshman year. So it was different. Time was different at that when I was 14. I became I don't want to say I became a man, but I became a man. You're a varsity quarterback, at 14, you're a freshman, everybody looking up to you and you looking up to them as they look up to you, which is crazy, right? But going from being a 14-year-old boy and playing against 17, 18-year-old men, I have a story where I tell where I played against Brett Bafaro. Brett Bafaro went to Oregon coming out of high school. He was 6'3", went to Liberty High School, 6'3", 225, 230 at the time, and I'm maybe 5'7", 150 pounds, soaking wet. You know what I mean? I was good, but I wasn't, near as should be on the field with this man. But it was physical. It was truly physical. Going into my sophomore year, I sustained my first concussion. I had 4. I sustained my first concussion my sophomore year. And I sat out, I want to say the last 4 games, I believe, the last 4 games of the season. I came back when we had our playoff game. And it was actually thanks to you. Crazy again, world just keep coming around. But it was for the return to play, yep, the impact testing and all that. I can't stand that test. It's awesome. Like, don't get me wrong, it's awesome because it's for athletes and return to play after a brain injury, something that they can't really see. You know what I mean? It's not like a broken wrist or something like that where you can see it and say, okay, you got 6 to 8 weeks, come on back. Concussion, man, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's four weeks, sometimes it's retire like I did at 19, before my incarceration. But I sustained my first injury or my first concussion my sophomore year. Symptoms, I don't remember much, but symptoms were the foggy vision. That's how I can explain it, is really living in a fog. Like you hear, but you're not here. You know what I mean? Kind of ish. You hear, but you're not here. And I actually have somebody that taught me at Park Rose right here in the corner. Y'all give it up for it right here. It's the MC back there. She remembered me from high school. So crazy. Another world thing going around, crazy. So she actually got to see me when I was concussed and whatnot. But shoot, not going to class and all that. Not doing no work. Nothing. I was doing work before, but not after. But anyway, let me get back. Yeah, it was like living in a fog, and this was just, I guess you could say a minor concussion, I guess, as they classified it. Everything goes, well, come back, whatever. Junior year was the big one. This is the my concussion. I actually got sent to the hospital. I was out. I don't know how long they said, 10 seconds maybe, that I was unconscious. And I came back and I was laying on the field for probably about 30, 40 minutes. They ended up telling me that game didn't end. Usually high school football games end at 10 o'clock. They said that game usually didn't end until about 11:30 because of me laying out on the field waiting for the ambulance. But I was 15, 16 at the time. That was... That's when I began to see changes. The things that they had up there on that board that, I really, I don't got the education to talk about. But those were the things that I was feeling at 16 years old. I was just a little boy, But I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't, you're a football player. You don't talk about, you soft. You just got your bell rung. That's the favorite one, ain't it? You get your bell rung. You just get your bell rung. Yeah, go ahead. You all right. And I was starting quarterback. I'm trying to get scholarships. I'm trying to put up numbers, trying to be the best in the state. And yeah, trying to be the best in the state messed me up. It messed me up. And I'm glad I'm still standing here and living. But that sent me to the hospital. I didn't go back to school. I didn't go back to school until I was probably out of school for about 2 months, just at home. And when I did come back to school, it was, okay, John, you can sit in class for 45 minutes. You can go to the office, just sit down. Like you said, dark light, they cut the light out for me. I went to go down to the trainer's room, and I was able to just lay down in the training room and literally where I'm supposed to be learning in class. I'm sitting in the training room sleeping or just sitting there, I'm supposed to be learning. I'm supposed to be having this 3.5 or above to get these scholarships and this and that, and I'm sitting in the training room at 11 o'clock with my hood on, sleeping or just relaxing, chilling, and you're 16, it doesn't even register in your brain, doesn't register. With the concussions as well, nothing really registered at that time, nothing. And I'm not just saying that just to say it, nothing registered. Like I said, I was living in a fog from 15 years old, even now, After that, I came back to school. Things were all right. Focusing was horrible. Barely had to do any work. And I got somebody to vouch for that. Barely had to do any work. You know what I mean? Nothing. They would allow me to go work out. I'm supposed to be in class. They allowed me to go work out. You know what I mean? Just to clear my mind, get my mind back on straight. Going into my senior year, I got another concussion against Wilsonville. But this was one of those ones where no, I'm good, coach. You know, and my boys was actually going up to the coaches and saying, "Hey, John messed up." You know what I mean? There's actually an article out there on Oregon Live right now that's saying one of my teammates went up to the trainer and was like, "Yo, you got to get John out of there. You know, he's not right." So that's how messed up it was. But again, my goal, full ride scholarship, got to stay on the field, got to play, got your bell rung, shake it off, buckle up your chin strap, put your mouthpiece in, just little things that they would say, you know, tighten your helmet up. Cool, all right, fine, let's do it, let's keep going. Not really understanding that I'm just bruising my brain more and more and more every single time that I went back out there with a bell rung, just bruising my brain, you know. And like I said again, it doesn't even register. You just want to do what you love to do. And at that time, I loved football. Senior year goes by, I graduate, thank the Lord. Barely graduated at that. But it was December, I ended up getting a full ride scholarship to go to Portland State. Dream come true. Everything, all the hard work done paid off. Concussions was the last thing on my mind. Wasn't even thinking about it. During my recruiting process, though, coaches definitely brought that up. And I believe that it left scholarships on the table for me because of those concussions. But I got blessed to go stay home and attend Portland State University on a full ride. So I get down to Portland State, and like I said, I grew up going to church Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm telling you, any day of the week, my mom was taking us to church. I didn't inhale not one whiff of marijuana. I didn't drink until prom maybe of senior year. That was my first time drinking ever. You know what I mean? Me and my buddy Elijah, they would make fun of us because we didn't smoke and drink at parties. We were the only ones like almost sober at the parties. You know what I mean? So they would make fun of us. But when I got to Portland State, dude, right when I got on campus, it was a switch. And I didn't even, like I said, I didn't even register. It didn't matter. Didn't matter. And from September of 2015 to November of 2016, before I got arrested, I was on some type of intoxicant every single day. Still going to lift at 5:30 in the morning, still going to practice right after work, still going to classes, still going to football meetings, going to sleep, and finding the way to still give my body those alcohol, Xanax, ecstasy, whatever y'all, just think of college and think of all the drugs and then just add that to my plate, because that's exactly what was going on. And it allowed a path of destruction to come upon my life. Still playing football, still looked good on the outside, you know, still going to church. I was a liaison at Portland State. You know, I would give out backpacks to kids. You know, we just do the little sign autographs, and not knowing that I'm high as a kite on every single drug an hour after I gave these kids backpacks, and, you know, shaking hands with deans, and, you know, the whole 9 yards, what a football player does, a quarterback at that, what a quarterback does at that. So it was just a concoction of, like I said, destruction. October 26, 2016 is when I first got arrested, but I'll take a step back. And I was a part of 3 robberies that happened over a span of 2 days. you know my case. But I was a part of 3 robberies in the span of 3 days that I took part in. I personally did not hold the weapon, but I take full responsibility like I was holding the weapon. Any intoxicant that you can think of, I was on during those nights. And I was waking up after the things that we were doing the next morning, still going to class, still going to lift. Like I said, it looked good from the outside. But my brain, my mind was not right. My thinking was not right. Like I said, I was on a path of destruction. And I shouldn't actually be here. Let me give a shout out to Professor Eliza Kaplan. Actually, I should not be here right now. My release date was January 22nd of 2025. Professor Eliza Kaplan and the Lewis and Clark Law Center actually worked on my clemency for Governor Kate Brown, and she signed it. And I got out December 22nd, 2022. So please give a round of applause for Ms. Eliza Kaplan. Yeah, she's a superstar. Oh, yeah, and Stephanie for sure. Yeah, she helped too. Absolutely. Yeah, give her one too, man. But you helped. So, yeah, real shout out. She's a superstar for that, seriously. Like, I shouldn't even be, right? I should still be in A Block 263, cell 263 in Salem. Yeah, the Oregon State Penitentiary, sorry. But back to what I was saying, those crimes were committed out of a broken heart, a broken brain, as you can say, a broken brain, a broken heart, and a 19-year-old boy that the past 4 years had been living in a fog where a 19-year-old boy should be having fun and, growing and achieving things and being with friends in a positive light. And, all my friends were in college doing this and doing that, and I was getting ready to face 90 months in prison after just running on a football field, after just giving out backpacks to kids. And back to what I was saying. Going through, so I got arrested. They arrested me on the football field, actually, too. Crazy, right? On the football field. All right, the woman of the hour is leaving.
I gotta go get my son. I'm so proud of both of you.
Thank you. Superstar, seriously, superstar. She pushed so hard for us to get out. She got out about 20 people in 2022 with Governor Kate Brown. So, and I was the only one that didn't have life that she got out. Crazy, right? I'm the only one that did less than 25 years, actually. Out of the 20 people that left OSP, I was the only one that without 25 years. So I'm blessed. I'm blessed. But I got arrested October 26, 2016. Did 20 days in the county jail. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and bash any police or anything like that, or because they handled me very well. I can say positively that the officers handled me very well, and it was on the brighter end because they knew who I was. So it's more, oh man, we're sorry that you're lost and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, I appreciate that. They did well, the officers did well and whatnot. But fighting the case, I can't even explain how I was feeling during that whole time. But I'll fast forward. Got to OSP. I got to OSP in 2017, 20 years old. Spent 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 incarcerated with multiple brain injuries, trying to figure out a way. And the only thing I could do in there was work out. I didn't get no therapy. I didn't get any type of, it's just now that I'm able to see like all the things that I was going through and you know, and I'm just one. Like all these stats and brain injuries and of individuals incarcerated, and I'm just one. There's individuals in there that are messed up. I worked as a peer companion, and this is what I love to talk about. I worked as a peer companion. I got about a minute left, but I worked as a peer companion, and in the mental health unit, ICH, MHI, all the alphabet letters that they give to these units and places that are on that compound in Salem. But I actually went to go back to where the death row building was and talk and play games, cards with the individuals back there. And I look at my brain injuries and laugh at them because these individuals they're messed up in there. They're truly messed up in there. So I'm just blessed and honored that I'm able to walk, talk, think sometimes, and able to share my story. Sometimes I don't like getting up here talking, but I know somebody got to do it because a lot of people don't want to do it. That's in my shoes and in my footsteps and look like me and walk through the same way I walk through. So let me get off this mic, and I really appreciate y'all for listening, and bless y'all, and thank y'all for coming for sure.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I'm over here. Thank you so much for sharing your story and how brain injury is an invisible injury, and that if people don't know about it, they can't support you. If they don't understand it, they don't know how to treat you. So I think that what you're doing today and all the time you're sharing your story, you're really bringing awareness to a very important issue. Thank you so much. Another hand, please.
There we go. I also want to thank all the panelists up there as well. This is an introduction to brain injury for me myself, and so I've learned a considerable amount about brain injuries. I'm a veteran as well, and we get slideshows, we get bullet points, you get a couple of high points, but that's about it. You don't get this real depth information, so thank you so much. And Jonathan, you don't know how much my heart has swelled just sitting here seeing you now. And the thoughtful, loving, compassionate, and caring young man that I met at 14 years old is the man that I see right now. So, yeah. All right. So, yeah, I'm sitting over there trying not to cry because you're not supposed to be crying when you facilitate, But in this next part, we're going to move to roundtable discussions. We did have 30 minutes slotted, but we're going to cut back a little bit just to allow us to have time to engage with some of our speakers as well. So at your tables, you'll see papers that should be either face down or face up, but it has 3 questions on there. And those 3 questions are also up here on the slides. But we wanted you to take the time to engage with one another around this topic. We believe you're here because you care about this topic and you have some experience or want to gain more information about this experience, brain injury. So please take this time to discuss with one another. So at each table, there is a lead. There's a PCCEP member who's a lead who will help move the discussion along. they should have, if they have not already, identified yourselves as the table leads. During discussion, we hope that each table spends some time sharing and listening to each other about the experiences and their knowledge around brain injuries. It may feel like there's a sense of urgency for solutions or future planning, and that is understandable, but this space is for processing and being together on this topic in the community. We understand that there's not enough time allotted to sit with each other, but we hope that you're able to use this opportunity to gain connection. So go ahead, take that time. Panelists, this is a great time for you all to breathe, grab a bite to eat, something to drink, take care of yourselves, and we'll bring you back at the end of about 15 minutes. All right, thank you. thoughts. You didn't? So we're wrapping up now. So we're on our last minute. Go ahead and wrap up your final thoughts, and then we'll bring it back together as a whole group. All right. So we wanted to go ahead and take an opportunity to bring this conversation to the larger group. And we know that when you get into storytelling and community, it's a good place to be. And so we're going to go ahead and bring it back to the larger group. So go ahead and finish your final thoughts, your final words. It might not be the period you prefer, but it is a period nonetheless. So, all right. Based on how challenging it is to bring you all back as a larger group, that tells me the conversation was good. So that's fantastic. Yeah, y'all still at it. I love it. I love it. That makes me happy. Yeah. So we wanted to take some time to hear, on a larger level from everyone here, or tables here, what stood out to you in your group. And then we also want to engage the panelists as well. And so how we'll do that, we about to find out together. So first off, in your discussions, if there is one table and one person who feels very inclined, if not, I will select a table. What stood out to you most in the conversation at your table? What stood out to you most? Yeah, go ahead, Ashley.
I think what stood out to all of us was the just listening to the lived experiences, and I mean that was just really impactful to understand where it comes from the ground level, especially the stories around the police interactions in both stories, right? Like kind of the good and the ugly, and just kind of deciphered that a little bit in terms of thinking about the question number 3 about what do you think police could do to improve interactions with people who have brain injuries or other disabilities? And one thing I think that kind of also that stood out from that is understanding how we can get police to respect who they're dealing with. Like it should be everybody, and then that can maybe delayer some of those really, really bad interactions. So thinking about how that would work. We talked about a little bit about some policy that could happen around that from the top to the bottom, making it more like something about about the system, but also about the individual. And we talked about some of the trainings that we understand about what PBB goes through. So yeah, that's kind of what I have so far.
Yeah, thank you. We had a hand back over here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of similar themes. I think one of the things that came up is it really brought up more questions, and I see that that's the second one.
Yeah.
But one of the big things is like, tell me what you don't remember, and the police officers are not identifying the symptoms properly because they don't know what the symptoms are, because very few of them are trained. The behavioral health unit is a very small unit. Not all officers are deeply trained in that. So it's like you're asking them to identify something that they don't know that they're encountering and dealing with because it's invisible, because that training should be far more expansive. And why isn't it? So that was one of the things that stood out.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that gap between what we know about brain injuries and getting law enforcement or those who in emergency services that education. either of the other tables, is there anything you all would like to share? I see no one's really excited to raise their hand. Oh, there we go.
Okay. I didn't really. We all appreciated the individual stories. Stephanie, Grace, and Jonathan appreciate. I think that helps give a lot of context to what we're talking about, because we talk about symptoms, we talk about a lot of these things, and it helps to be like concrete examples of what that really means. I think the one thing that we all kind of agreed really stood out is the statistics that we saw, and especially the ties with like homelessness and incarceration and brain injury, and how it's like such a stark thing to just see those numbers, and that there's obviously room for improvement in recognizing that. Yeah.
Next, I would love to. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is this on? Okay. Hi, my name is Laura. And our table really discussed a few things about just a few of us here with acquired brain injury. If I were to walk down the street, you would never know that I have a brain injury. I also work in the medical field in inpatient rehab, so I work with people newly acquired brain injury, head injury, and stroke. For myself personally, it was much easier to come out as gay than it was to come out with a head injury. Because of that perception of then there might be something wrong with you. The people who know me before my latest head injury, because I've had 5 major concussions in my lifetime, 2 of them playing football, women's pro football defensive end, boom, smashed the quarterback. But snowboarding, and if somebody talked to me when I was coming down the mountain, my partner at the time's an ER nurse, she's like, where the heck is Laura? They took me to the medical there at Mount Hood, and I'm saying, my name's Laura, this is what I do, and whatnot. But I think in our discussion here, to get back to that, was the education piece. And people with lived experience, there's never enough education. And I think hearing from people with lived experiences, Jose pointed out something great that he has on his phone in his health part, his medical part, that if he can't access it, it's something that anybody can access, and in there it says, I have a brain injury, those types of things. When I am working with people, especially young men and young men of color with traumatic brain injury leaving the hospital, if they're fortunate to even come into inpatient rehab, that's a whole nother statistic we can talk about another day, is making sure that the families, education, but those people are going home, anybody going home with a card that they can put in their wallet or carry on themselves, or actually we're getting medical bracelets, if they're willing to wear it, that says, I have a brain injury, I have aphasia, those types of things, because we realize that it has to be us that have to educate people.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, to this next point, what questions came up for you all during your discussion? And I think we'll start at the far table, because y'all said y'all had a load of questions that came up in your conversation. So yeah, what questions, maybe one question to start off to the room, and if any of our panelists feel like they can engage that question, please take it on.
Oh, I think these questions were more for the PPB, and it was more about that, because so I think a lot of it was around the training. It's like, what kind of training is there, and why is it a mystery to the public what training is there? And I think there's a lot of elements in the criminal justice system that deal with people. Honestly, after listening to this presentation, it explains why recidivism is high, right? And who are police officers often interacting with, repeat offenders and things like that. And a lot of times repeat offenders may not have the grace of like a master's degree college education to, explain away actions, right? So they get less benefit of the doubt, so things like that. So I think, we would have liked to see somebody from the PPB here to talk through those things and things like that. There was also a comment that was, brought up about people that have had this training, and even they get jaded and maybe miss these signs. So there's just kind of that was that discussion as well. So sorry, that was a long-winded
Not long-winded at all. Thank
Can I speak to just a tiny
Go
piece
ahead.
of that? There's been, since my focus is criminal justice reform, there's been some really incredible work and studies coming out of Colorado from people who are released from incarceration, working with brain injury focused probation and parole officers who acknowledge that the probationers do have brain injuries, because a lot of what's happening with recidivism is that they're breaking some sort of rule about their probation or parole, and it can be that your check-in time has to be this time and you have to conform to this schedule or this expectation. And you think about some of the rules as they're laid out for somebody in conjunction with some of those the symptoms that you've seen of brain injury, and you can see how you're kind of setting somebody up to fail when it's not necessarily that they woke up in the morning and went, I'm gonna crime today. So when you have a focus for kind of accommodating the brain injury, and it doesn't mean I'm not gonna hold you to a certain standard of, these are the expectations, but the accommodations that we're talking about, that you're getting instructions that are written, that maybe we have a notebook, that we have a calendar, that, on your phone we have reminder apps with alarm bells and things like that. What they noticed was a significant and remarkable increase in their ability to reach the compliance standard of whatever they were being asked to do, which meant that the recidivism rates went down, 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 down. And I think that's a really critical component to putting a stop to recidivism, especially when we think about the statistics of people who are incarcerated and coming out of incarceration with brain injuries. And I think that's a really easy fix that we could implement into the criminal legal system just by acknowledging that most of the people coming out are going to have brain injuries. And if we could work in partnership with that knowledge with the probation and parole programs to restructure how they're going to administer that, I just think that would be a lovely first step.
And I'm going to add to that. The gentleman that is leading the way in Colorado is a gentleman named Markell Taylor, Marchell Taylor. Markell was incarcerated for about 24 years of his life. He committed a crime upon his most recent release, and because of his impassioned work with Dr. Kim Gorgans, and Dr. Gorgans has done a couple of TED Talks. You can find her out there as well. She is absolutely inspiring. With Markell and Kim working together, they have convinced a huge segment of the Colorado judiciary and other, the parole boards and others, that brain injury needs to be treated as an injury. And as Stephanie said, you don't just warehouse, you don't just shove them away. You treat them, and when it is treated seriously as an injury and they receive appropriate treatment, the recidivism rate does in fact go down. There has been actually some other studies. There's a gentleman out of Indiana named Dr. Lance Trexler, who has done some studies on providing people with resource navigation upon their release from prison, inmates with brain injury upon their release. And that is exactly what the impetus was for our work to pass Senate Bill 420, which is now being developed by the Department of Human Services for that exact reason. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you so much.
One last thing. Markell was interviewed by People magazine, and that article is coming out, I think, at the end of this month. Yeah.
Outstanding. Is there someone else who'd like to speak to? Oh, yeah, go ahead. Oh.
Thank you. Hello. That's working. Okay. I think similar to the first group that shared, we had kind of questions about police and for police. And just one that I'll share is can you train compassion and care in Or is that something that just like kind of exists? That wasn't meant to be so dramatic. But just like, what does it mean to be a person who interacts with so many different people and like to treat them with care and dignity when you meet them and interact with them, and not treat them as like someone that's a danger to you when you don't know them? Do you want to add something?
And that goes back to culture. That is the carceral system culture. The policing culture and the correctional officer culture is us versus them. That culture has to shift because we're all people. And the only way that culture is going to shift is when you have to, like listens to like, lawyers listen to lawyers, PhDs listen to PhDs, police listen to police, correctional officers listen to correctional officers. Finding the champions is really important.
I have a quick response to some of the stuff that's the comments that have come up. Again, Dory Grabinski, PCCEP project manager. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge, so the planning team for this event, including myself, PCCEP staff, and then PCCEP members, you heard from Tia, we did discuss, we talked quite a lot actually about the possibility of inviting PPB to participate in the panel. I think we're hearing, and I think the planning team fully acknowledges, there's a huge amount of information that we would want to gather about PPB policies and practices as they relate to this issue. Even if brain injury may not be specifically named, there could be components of the landscape as it currently exists that do speak to some of these concerns, or maybe things that PCCEP or the community would identify as needing to be improved, et cetera. But ultimately, the planning team we did decide against making that invitation, because I think, as you've all experienced, there's so much to cover just from sort of the panel of experts that we do have today. And so I think we're thinking of this more as kind of a generative starting point for having this community discussion, and hearing what you're interested in learning more about from that side of things is super worthwhile. But I just did want to take just acknowledge that choice, and that it was a choice on the part of the planning team, and not, that we did not make that invitation for this event. Yeah.
Thank you. Introducing myself very quickly, my name is Patricia Kepler, she, her pronouns, and I am actually a new employee to the Portland Police Bureau, their very first accessibility analyst. Thank you. And I have a disability myself. I'm totally blind. I have my guide dog here at my feet. My entire career has been disability advocacy. I worked at Independent Living Resources for 15 years as an independent living specialist, and then went on to PCC, working as an accessibility specialist for them. I took this position with the Police Bureau with this in mind. So I've only been employed there for 4 weeks. I'm brand new, you guys. But I'm really hoping that I can be a connection, and that together we can make some change and shift that culture.
Welcome, welcome, Patricia, and thank you for being present for this and putting your voice in the space. So greatly happy to be connected. So for the other two tables, are there any questions that surface for you all that you would like to put in the space, whether to be addressed by the panelists or just things that were just mulling around in your conversations? Yeah, we got 2 mics, y'all.
I mean, yeah, I think we asked initially why there are no PPB officers here. Yes, on the panel, correct. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, to clarify, they were invited. And yeah, I mean, their presence is missing. I think, we talked about a lot about the culture change and respect. And one question I asked the group, like, why in Stephanie's situation, why were they so mean? Why were the police so and that's what we were talking about, that respect thing. But then Adelia, like, yeah, how do you train for care and compassion? Can you train to respect? Are there things that police need to be thinking about when they interact? I mean, I know the city is going to be implementing contact surveys, and it's so great that there's a disability analyst. So there's these puzzle pieces coming together where we can get better answers of, like, why would a police officer act this way? Is it lack of education? Okay, that seems easy and enough, but is anybody really focusing on that at PPB?
I'm gonna jump in here real fast. I just opened up a text that I received from Markel Taylor. I told him I was gonna be here tonight. And Markel says, officers must be brain injury screened before being able to serve.
Amen.
Yeah. He's suggesting, I'm not gonna read his words completely, but he is essentially saying that perhaps it is impairments on their part that are leading them to superimpose their actions onto others. And so I think that, that's coming straight from his text here, and I think we have to listen to that. It might make some sense.
If I could just chime in, the sense that I got throughout my experience was that from the get-go, they felt everything that I was saying was an excuse and a manipulation tactic to get maybe better treatment or to get something. So the frame of reference that they were coming from the instant I walked through or was forcefully escorted through the doors with silver bracelets on, was that I was trying to get something, get out of something, or employing some sort of manipulation tactic. And I think part of that maybe was prior experience, and maybe part of that was a long day. Part of that there's just so many myriads of things that I wasn't a party to, but I think it comes down to, for the record, by the way, one of my closest friends is a police officer, although not with Portland Police. And, she talks a lot about some of the training that they go through about, wariness and, be aware of certain manipulations and things like that. So I think, particularly because my experience, happened, in 2015, on top of the fact that you had a lack of training and there was a lack of knowledge base at the time, I think if I were to hazard a guess, because nobody ever explained it to me, those are the assumptions I'm going to make, is that just in general, I was being treated the way that I was being treated, partially out of ignorance and partially out of an assumption that I was trying to manipulate my way into something.
Yeah. Fern, before you, I just want to add to that really quickly. In Colorado, they had the exact same fear that when they started screening inmates, that inmates were going to use that as just another way to get something for themselves. What they found, however, was that when these inmates were screened, when the inmates realized that perhaps their aberrant behavior was something caused by their history of brain injury, it gave them hope. And it decreased. And in fact, on all of the effort tests that are embedded in the neuropsychological exam, the inmates scored really high on the effort testing. Whether it was the actual test designed to weed out malingering, or whether it was some of the embedded questions. So they thought the exact same thing in Colorado. They found the opposite.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Fern, could you go ahead and also just introduce yourself to the space one more time?
Say what?
Could you go ahead and reintroduce yourself for this space one more time?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm Fern Wilgus. I'm the Vice President of Brain Injury Connections Northwest, kind of a cohort with everybody here. I want to first of all thank everybody for all your participation and all of the real valuable information that we're getting from one another. This is not what I intended to talk about, because David was reading my mind. And so anyhow, what I want to do is just really thank everybody. But I also would like to say that brain injury and knowing about brain injury and about how to care for and all of that sort of thing is relatively new. And this is probably why a lot of people don't know. 2015 seems like it was just not that far ago, but in comparison to what everybody knows today about brain injury, and it's still learning. The path, I think Andy and David both would equally say, this is still a learning feature creature, if you will. I have all these technical terms, so stick with me. So one of the things that I personally don't like to do as I work within some other law enforcement areas is I do not want to blame the officers because they're doing what they're taught to do. I love the fact, and we know, in case a lot of the police officers today are former military. So what are they taught to do? Defend themselves, and kill and that sort of thing. I think by having a little bit of more information about brain injury, having to have some compassion with the police officers in they're doing what they're taught to do, they're doing what they're told to do. When you're in the military, you know exactly when you're supposed to be saluting or agreeing what to do. And so I just felt like I had to do a little bit of defense, but this is one hell of a great crowd to where now we're asking some questions so that we all can move forward. I'm done. I could speak forever, but I'm done.
Thank you, Fern. And so we're nearing the end of the time. I kind of gave y'all a heads up that there's not enough time for this conversation, but yeah, we're going to wrap up right now. And just want to turn to the panelists one final time. Do any of you have a brief comment that you feel like is really important to be shared with this community today?
Well, real briefly, I'm going to say that it is just a real honor to hear Jonathan talk about how the return to play protocols really helped him. That happened in 2009. Oregon was the first state in the country to enact return to play protocols. Washington was just 2 weeks behind us. And 4 years later, all 50 states had a similar law. That is prevention. And Jonathan, thank you very much. Thanks.
All right. At this time, we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to Tia. She's going to have our closing comments.
Thank you so much for coming and for your time with us tonight. This was such a great conversation and discussion in our small groups and our share out. PCCEP will consider the things that we discussed today and may include those in some possible recommendations. If you signed in the front with your email address, we will keep you updated with our ongoing work today, and you can always follow along on our website and social media. We have public meetings most Wednesday nights on Zoom at 6 p.m. if you can join, and thank you again so much for coming.
Thank you again, Tia, and also thank you, Tia, for being the spearhead and really leading the charge to make this